So, hello, everybody. All our counselors spread out across several state region and our office staff. We're just kind of gathered again together to kind of ponder and consider how we can do the very best as counselors to make the biggest impact possible. And we're doing that. We have great counselors, great office staff, and we're really slaying it out there, but we don't want to be complacent and comfortable. And so I have my friend Matt with me today. And I know Matt from the biking world. And this one particular day, I think it was the summer of 2015, a year and a half ago. I was with my family at Ocean City, Maryland. He was in Bethany or Rehoboth with his family. And being in a bike club's like being in a cult. So we all, like four of us, gathered together who were at the beach to do a ride together. And we're flying down Route 1, a 15-mile stretch, and I'm holding on to this guy's wheel for dear life, huffing and puffing. And we pull over and get some water because we're thirsty. And Matt turns to me and he says, "Hey, Eric, hey, did I ever tell you my water miracle story?" And I said, "No, Matt, you didn't." And so I'm going to ask him to tell that. Incidentally, what's really neat is, Matt, I think you wouldn't mind if I said this, that Matt would describe himself as laying some spiritual foundations
That's
in his
correct.
life the last couple of months, really. And so I think at the point the water miracle story happened, you weren't even at that point spiritually, really, of trying to lay spiritual foundations down. And this story happened. I'm going to let Matt tell it. So Matt, give us the synopsis. Tell us the story of the water miracle story, and then I'll tie that to what we do as counselors at Safe Harbor.
Sure thing. Thanks, Eric. So it was, I believe it was July. It was the time of year, I think it was the year before Eric and I were having that ride together, and I was riding with my friend Andrew. He was a very spiritual guy, a really great guy, and also a very fast bike rider. And we had gone out for a ride together that ended up being a lot longer and a lot harder than I anticipated. And Eric's familiar with that. You know, when you go out, it was supposed to be an easy hour, and 4 hours later, you're still out there. So it was a really hot, muggy day. We were riding really hard. As I said, Andrew's a very strong rider, so I was doing everything I could to keep up with him. And we were out in the middle of nowhere in northern Baltimore County, I think in the Moncton area. And we had finished a long climb and gotten to an intersection, and we were both completely out of water. We were really dehydrated. It was one of those really typical Maryland summer days, high humidity. There was not a breeze in the air. We were sweating profusely, completely out of water. And Andrew says something to the effect of, "God, I could really use some water right now. Where can we find it?" And we were stopped at the corner. I can't remember the roads, but it was a T intersection. And there's an old general store there that has to be 100 years old, the building. And if no one has been in there, it's been unoccupied for probably 40 or 50 years. Still has one of those old-fashioned Coca-Cola signs on it. No signs of life. There's no vehicle parked in front of it or anything like that. Well, no less than 5 seconds after Andrew says I would call it a mini prayer or a little mini ask of God, a man comes out of this abandoned building and says, "You guys look awfully thirsty. I've got some ice cold bottles of water here for you." And he hands us these bottles of water. And I don't know if you've ever had that water where it's colder than cold, where it's been submerged in a cooler full of ice water. So it's just the absolute coldest it could possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and in the summertime, when you're on a hot ride and you need water, there's nothing. It's not the same as buying one from the Royal Farms or the 7-Eleven. Those aren't that cold. This was ice cold, crystal clear water. He hands us both 2 bottles. I think we poured some over our head a little bit, started to fill up our bottles. We go to turn around to say thank you, and the guy's not there. Again, there was no vehicle at the place. I don't know what he was doing there. I don't know where he got bottles of ice cold water, but it was literally the coldest water I'd ever drank, and it came at the perfect time. And Andrew and I couldn't do anything but laugh. As Eric said, I'm still kind of finding my own spiritual foundations, my own way spiritually. Andrew's much farther along in that regard, and he said, hey, it's amazing what'll happen if you just ask God for some help. So we kind of had a good laugh about it. I didn't know what to think, to be honest with you. All I knew is that I had ice cold water on a day when I really needed it. So that's pretty much the story. It's not that long and exciting, but it was something that's going to stick with me for a long time. That's for sure.
It's pretty exciting, Matt. I mean, it might not be that long, but it's really made an impact on me for a year and a half. I think the one thing that would have made it more exciting was if the old guy had said, "Hey, do you want some water and some crab cakes?" That would have really been great.
Yeah.
But no, just kidding. That's really impacted me, and it kind of reminded me. I'm going to hit a little screen share here. It kind of reminded me of a verse. Now you're seeing all my emails, folks. In the book of James, it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. And so I think, wow, as counselors, we really need wisdom a lot. And I know I put up this graphic, I think in the last time I did one of these, talking about what makes Safe Harbor unique in what we do. And we came up with these 4 things here: building therapeutic relationship, knowledge base, personal growth and maturity, and a fit with our practice culture and vision. And the X factor, or the secret sauce in all this, I really, really believe is crying out to God and asking God for wisdom. And I just want to tell a quick story clinically of how this happened with one of our counselors' cases that was very powerful, where God kind of answered a prayer ad hoc, kind of like what Matt went through, where we had a counselor. Let me see if I can get the story right. A counselor told me the story of a college girl that they were counseling, and the girl had had an abortion, and that was a really hard thing for this client and so forth. And like a period of time went by, and it was a later session, and the client was sharing how being around kids was difficult for her, and she kind of threw that out there at the end of a session to our counselor. And so our counselor, kind of maybe being a little slow on the uptake, was kind of like, "Oh, really? Why is that hard for you?" And she's like, "Well, because of the abortion and so forth." And so it's kind of at the end of the session, they really didn't get a chance to process it a whole lot. And so the counselor kind of felt bad and was like, "Wow, I kind of forgot this like really important thing. It didn't come to mind." And counselors really just praying that God would give them the wisdom of how to address, give some encouragement to this client. And what the counselor ended up texting the client like a day or two later and just said, "I want you to know," and they really felt like God gave them this after praying about it. "I want you to know that the reason why I didn't immediately think of the abortion when you talked about it being difficult to be around kids was because I really see you as so much more than a woman who's had an abortion. That's true, and we need to process that. But I see you as so much more than that." And the client came in, and that was a game changer. That was a turning point in therapy, knowing that her counselor believed in her that much to say, "I really see you as so much more." And it all just flowed out of, a prayer of asking God for wisdom. So I just really want to encourage all of us. I thank Matt so much for sharing his story, to just say that, like, you don't have to be super spiritual on your journey or at a mountaintop place, that God will answer our cries for help for him. So thanks a lot for listening to this. Thanks for what you all do, and see you all later.